Okay, so I want you to close your eyes for a second. Well, hang on. If you're driving or, operating heavy machinery, maybe. Maybe don't do that. Please keep them open. But if you're safe, just picture this with me. You're a teenager, but not a teenager today with a smartphone and a packed schedule.
Hmm.
You're a teenager 2,000 years ago. You're in Capernaum, Galilee.
That is a very specific setting. I mean, we're talking dust, heat, stone structures, and culturally we are talking about a total pressure cooker.
Exactly. I really want to set this scene visually. Imagine deep, heavy shadows. Art historians call it chiaroscuro, that intense contrast between the darks and the lights, because that's what the atmosphere feels like. It's oppressive. You've got Roman soldiers on the corners. There's this constant sort of low-level hum of anxiety.
Right.
People are struggling to pay taxes. They're afraid of the authorities. And there's just this weight of difficult days hanging over everything. It's noisy, it's uncertain, and frankly, it's scary.
It's a world where the shadow really feels like it's winning. The dominant emotion isn't peace, it's just survival.
Right. But then you hear a rumor, there's a rabbi, a teacher. People are saying, he's different. So you join this massive crowd walking up a dusty road to a mount overlooking the sea. You're sweating, you're tired, you're worried about your family back home. And then you hear him speak. And he says something that just, it cuts through all that noise like a knife.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God.
That's the line, Matthew 5.9. And you're standing there in the middle of an occupied country surrounded by tension, and you have to be thinking, peace? Really? How? It feels almost like cognitive dissonance, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. To hear about peace when your day-to-day reality is fear.
It creates this massive tension.
It does. And that tension, it isn't unique to first century Galilee. If we fast forward 2 millennia to right now, the Roman soldiers might be gone, but the commotion definitely isn't.
Oh, definitely not. The dust has just turned into, digital static.
Precisely. Instead of physical occupation, we have polarization. We have road rage. We have social media pile-ons where people get, destroyed for a single comment. We have secularization and this pervasive feeling of division. The scenery has changed, but the shadow, that feeling of oppression and conflict, it remains very similar.
And that leads us to the big question for today's deep dive. We're looking at a stack of sources centered around a talk by Elder Gary E. Stevenson called Blessed Are the Peacemakers. And he poses this question that I think every single one of us has asked ourselves at 2 in the morning while doom scrolling. He asks, can I truly become a peacemaker when the world is in commotion, when my heart is filled with fear, and when peace seems so far away?
It's the central question of our time, isn't it? Is peace actually possible, or is it just a nice idea we talk about on Sundays? And the sources we have today are fascinating because they argue that the answer is a resounding yes. But, and this is the key, it requires a specific kind of architecture. It's not accidental, it's built.
Okay, let's unpack this architecture. Because I have to be honest with you, and I think I speak for a lot of our listeners here, when I hear the word peacemaker, I have a very specific and maybe slightly negative reaction.
Negative? How so?
Well, it sounds a little soft. It sounds like being a doormat.
Yeah.
In the real world, in a corporate boardroom or a political debate, or even just dealing with a difficult contractor, if you're the peacemaker, you're usually the one getting steamrolled.
Okay, so you feel like you're losing ground, or...
Exactly. If I don't clap back, or if I, turn the other cheek, the other guy wins. He gets the promotion, or he wins the argument. It feels like this advice is just setting us up to surrender our principles just to avoid making things awkward.
And that is that's the instinctive reaction, right?
Yeah.
And it's a really common one. Elder Stevenson actually addresses that head on. He argues that we have confused passivity with peacemaking. They are not the same thing.
Okay, so what's the difference? Because they can look the same from the outside. Both involve not fighting back.
Passivity is staying quiet because you're afraid. Peacemaking is staying quiet because you are disciplined. The source makes a fascinating distinction here. Peacemaking is not weakness, it is strength. In fact, the argument is that it requires more raw strength to be a peacemaker than to be a fighter.
Walk me through that.
Okay, think about gravity. When someone insults you or cuts you off in traffic, what is the path of least resistance? What does your body want to do naturally?
Oh, to scream, to hit back, or at least to come up with a really scathing comeback that just destroys them.
Exactly. Retaliation is instinct. It's gravity. It's easy to fall down a hill. To stop that cycle, to absorb a blow and not return it, to choose a different response, That takes immense muscle. It takes discipline to override your biology. The sources describe the peacemaker not as someone who compromises their values, but as someone who has the courage to lead with an open heart rather than a closed mind.
There's a visual in the notes here I like. Clenched fists versus extended hands.
That's the distinction. A clenched fist is defensive, it's angry, it's ready to strike. An extended hand is vulnerable, yes, but it's also inviting. It takes courage to extend a hand when you aren't sure if it will be shaken or slapped away.
So we aren't talking about avoiding conflict because we're scared. We're talking about managing conflict because we're strong.
Correct. And the motivation isn't just to be nice, it's deeper. The source connects this directly to identity. We go back to that beatitude, for they shall be called the children of God. The argument here is that we don't seek peace just to be polite. We seek it because it is our divine DNA. It's who we are meant to be. It's covenant discipleship.
Okay, I can buy that, conceptually at least. But if we accept that peacemaking is strength, that it's our job, how do we actually do it? Because frankly, the world is loud and my patience is short. I can't just flick a switch and become Gandhi.
No, and you aren't expected to do it all at once. The sources lay out a structure that I find really helpful. It's a ripple effect. It suggests that peace has to move from the inside out. You can't export what you don't have. So the architecture is heart, then home, then community.
Okay, let's start with the heart. This is the internal game.
This is where the light starts. If we go back to our visual theme, this is that single candle flickering in the dark. Elder Stevenson points out that peace begins with our divine inclinations. And to illustrate this, he doesn't quote philosophers or theologians, he quotes primary children.
I love this part of the source material, but at first glance it felt a little cute. You know, kids saying the darndest things. But when I actually read the quotes, there's some real grit there.
Which one stood out to you?
Well, there's Trevor. Trevor says, if there's one donut left and you all want it, you share.
See, Trevor is dealing with real-world economics right there, the scarcity mindset.
Seriously. That's the root of so many wars, isn't it? I want the resource, you have the resource. If we could just apply the one donut doctrine to international relations, we'd be set. But then there was Liam. And Liam hit me hard. He said, don't be mean to people, even if they are mean to you.
Even if they are mean to you, that is profound. That's the break in the cycle of retaliation we were just talking about. The analysis here is that these children aren't being taught to be something foreign. They are expressing something innate. The gospel, the teachings of Jesus, are meant to knit these natural childlike inclinations into our permanent character as adults.
So we start by reclaiming that inner light. But here is where the rubber meets the road. It's easy to be peaceful in my heart when I'm alone in my car listening to a podcast. It's easy to have divine inclinations when nobody is bothering me.
True. Solitude is easy peace.
But then I walk through the front door, and the house is a mess, the kids are screaming, or my spouse is stressed. And that inner light flickers out pretty fast.
And that is the perfect pivot point. The ripple has to move from the heart to the home, and the source material acknowledges that for many of us, the home isn't a sanctuary of peace. It can actually be the place where our patience is thinnest.
Because the stakes are higher.
And the filters are lower. We treat our families in ways we'd never treat a stranger or a coworker. We snap. We criticize, we hold grudges. The source shares a really specific story here about a family facing a Cold War situation that I think we need to look at closely.
Yeah, let's double click on this.
Yeah.
Because this isn't just a generic be nice to your sister story. This involved an adult relative.
Right. The source describes a family dealing with an extended family member who is described as grumpy, condescending, and curt.
Ugh. We all know someone like that, just walking on eggshells around them. Every interaction feels like you're bracing for impact.
And the children in this family were hurt. They were frustrated. And the temptation, the natural reaction, again, gravity, was to mirror that behavior, to be snippy back or just to ice this person out completely.
Which is what most of us do. We detach. We put up a wall.
Exactly. But the family decided to try an experiment. And this wasn't just trying to be nicer. It was strategic. They agreed that for a set period of time, they would engage in deliberate kindness.
Deliberate kindness. I like that phrasing. It implies it wasn't easy. It was a choice.
It was an outpouring of kind words and thoughtful deeds, regardless of how the relative responded. And this is the part that's hard to grasp. They basically bombarded this person with love, even when that person was being curt or condescending. Can you imagine the discipline that takes? To smile and offer to help someone who just insulted you?
That sounds excruciating, honestly. It goes against every fiber of your ego. So what happened? Did the relative magically transform overnight like in a Disney movie?
No, and that's why this story's credible. It wasn't overnight. But the source says the cold exchanges began to thaw. Smiles replaced scowls. The relative did change. But here is the fascinating part, and I think this is the key insight for our listeners. The biggest change wasn't in the grumpy relative.
He was in the family.
It was in the children. They found joy in leading with love. They felt empowered because they weren't being reactive anymore. They were being active agents of the environment they wanted to live in. They realized they could set the thermostat of the room rather than just reflecting the temperature.
There's a phrase in the text that I highlighted. Kindness had done its quiet work. That gives me chills. It's like the sun melting ice. You don't see it happen second by second, but eventually the season changes.
And that leads us to the final and perhaps the most difficult ripple. If you can establish that warmth in your heart and then struggle through it to build warmth in your home, you are ready to take it to the community.
And this is where the visuals in our head should shift to full daylight. We're talking about bridging huge divides. The source gives us a story from Nigeria that is, honestly, it puts my neighborhood squabbles to shame.
It really does. This is the story of two men, Imam Muhammad Ashafa and Pastor James Wuye.
A Muslim imam and a Christian pastor.
And we need to be clear here. These weren't just two neighbors who attended different places of worship. These men were on opposite sides of a violent, painful religious conflict. They were leaders of opposing militias.
So we are talking about actual violence.
Real violence. They both suffered personal, physical losses because of the other side. The source details that they were enemies in the truest sense of the word. The natural human trajectory here, the justice trajectory, is revenge. It's a blood feud. For them to sit in a room together, let alone work together, is statistically impossible.
So how did they break that gravity? Because that's not something you do just because you read a nice quote on Instagram.
It required what the source calls radical forgiveness. They had to separate the person from the conflict. They realized that their mutual destruction was guaranteeing a future of suffering for their communities. So, through a painful process, they decided to trust. They established the Interfaith Mediation Center.
And they didn't just stop fighting. They became partners.
They became friends. They won the Commonwealth Peace Prize. They are now working actively to diffuse tensions in Kaduna, Nigeria. They replaced walls of prejudice with bridges of understanding.
That is heavy. It puts my annoyance with my neighbor's political yard sign into a very different perspective.
And that's the point Elder Stevenson is making. If peace is possible there, in the ashes of militia conflict, then our excuses for not building bridges in our cul-de-sacs start to look pretty thin. We often say, well, you don't know what my neighbor said on Facebook, or you don't know who they voted for.
Right. We justify our hostility because we think our grievance is special.
But compared to what the imam and the pastor overcame, our walls are made of cardboard. The quote from Elder John A. Whitsoe in the source sums it up. The only way to build a peaceful community is to build men and women who are lovers and makers of peace.
It puts the responsibility right back on us. We can't wait for society to get better. Society is just a collection of us. So we've got the why identity. We've got the how ripple effect. Now, I want to get to the what now, because Elder Stevenson doesn't just leave us with warm fuzzies and stories about Nigeria. He gives a specific challenge.
He calls it the One-Week Peacemaker Plan. It's a 3-step protocol to move from theory to practice.
I love a good protocol, but some of these sound harder than others. Let's break them down. Step 1.
Step 1 is the contention-free home zone.
Ooh, that sounds ambitious.
The instruction is simple. When a fight starts, or when you feel that temperature rising in the kitchen, you know that feeling where your chest gets tight.
Oh yeah, the I need to win this feeling.
Right then, you hit pause, you literally stop, and you reboot the conversation with kind words.
It's the reboot that gets me. It's admitting, okay, this is going off the rails, let's start over. It takes so much humility to do that. It basically requires you to drop the need to have the last word.
Which is why it's so effective. It signals to the other person, our relationship is more important than my victory.
Okay, step 2. This is the one that I think every modern listener needs tattooed on their hand.
Digital bridge building. Or, as I like to think of it, the filter.
The filter.
The challenge is this. Before you post, before you comment, before you send that snarky reply in the group chat, you ask one question. Will this build a bridge?
Okay, but let's be real for a second. Sometimes you see something online that is just wrong, factually wrong, or offensive, or just stupid. Do we have a moral obligation to correct it? Is the source saying we just let everything slide?
This is where it gets nuanced. It's not about silence, it's about intent. The source quotes Elder Stevenson saying we should publish peace. That doesn't mean you can't disagree, but are you disagreeing to humiliate the other person or to invite a conversation?
So it's the difference between commenting, "You're an idiot," and "I see it differently, here is why."
Precisely. It's checking your motivation. If your goal is to dunk on someone for likes or to signal your own virtue by tearing someone down, you aren't building a bridge, you're burning one. And the challenge is to have the discipline to delete the draft if the answer to "will this build a bridge" is no.
That is tough. Social media is designed to reward the hottest take, the sharpest dunk. Peace doesn't usually go viral.
No, it doesn't. But remember, we aren't doing this for the algorithm.
Right.
We are doing this because of our identity as children of God. It goes back to that strength versus weakness concept. It takes incredible strength to see a provoking post and choose not to add to the fire.
It really does. Okay, step 3.
Repair and reunite. The instruction is to identify one strained relationship, just one, and reach out.
Apologize. Minister, or just say hi.
Whatever is needed to repair the breach, it's about being the initiator.
But what if it's awkward? What if they don't respond?
Then you've still succeeded. Because you did your part. You extended the hand. Remember, you can't control the outcome. You can only control the invitation.
So that's the plan. 3 steps, 1 week. It sounds simple, but if everyone listening actually did this, the ripple effect would be massive.
It would be transformative. And if we look at the visual journey we've been on, from the shadows of Capernaum and the static of our modern rage, moving through the warmth of the heart, the thawing of the home, and out into the bright daylight of a healed community, it's a beautiful trajectory.
It really is. You know, looking at all these sources, I keep coming back to that initial feeling of cognitive dissonance we talked about at the beginning. The world is messy. It is loud. And sometimes it feels like being a peacemaker is just futile, like throwing a cup of water on a forest fire.
That's a valid feeling, but I think the deep dive takeaway here is that we have the physics of peace backwards. We usually think, when the world calms down, then I'll be peaceful. When my relative stops being grumpy, then I'll be kind. When politics aren't so toxic, then I'll reach out.
We're waiting for the external conditions to change before we change our internal state.
Exactly. But the source material, from the Sermon on the Mount to the story of the Nigerian peacemakers, suggests the inverse. The world doesn't create peace for us. We create peace for the world. We are the architects. The calm doesn't come from the outside in, it moves from the inside out.
That's the aha moment for me. I'm not waiting for peace. I'm bringing it.
Precisely. We aren't observers of the chaos, we are the antidote to it.
So here's our final thought for you to chew on as you go about your week. Look at that 3-step plan again. The contention-free zone, the digital filter, or the repair job. Which one of those made your stomach tighten just a little bit? Which one made you think, ugh, I really don't want to do that?
That reaction is usually a compass.
Exactly. That fear, that resistance, that's probably pointing you exactly where you need to go. That's where your work is.
And remember, you aren't doing it alone, you're doing it alongside the Prince of Peace.
So don't just listen to this and nod. Go do the scary thing. Go build a bridge. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
See you next time.